Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to the channel. My name is Dasha and today I have a recommendation video for you. Now, most of us associate thrillers and horrors with spooky season, with like October, November when the weather gets dark and moody and stormy, but I have a special place in my heart for summery, like spring summery thrillers and horror books, and that's what I want to talk about today. I've noticed that a lot of the thrillers and horror that I tend to really enjoy and gravitate towards are really better suited for summer reading. There's something about a summer night with that like oppressive heat, and it's still kind of light outside but not so light that it feels, you know, clean and like there's nothing lurking, especially once it does finally hit dark. It kind of feels like it's not supposed to be scary, but that makes it all the more scary. We also get obviously the typical kind of summer camp, mountain town, quiet resort town that's supposed to be all cute and sweet, but that's hiding stuff type of settings in the summer. And that's kind of what I want to focus on. So these are some thriller and horror books that I think are perfect for your summer reading plans if you're looking for something a little bit less light, but still kind of fitting with the vibe and atmosphere of summer. I'm going to start with thrillers and then move into the horror. And the first one I want to talk about is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Now, this one's had a little bit of hype because it was a limited series, I'm pretty sure, with Amy Adams, if I'm not mistaken. But if you don't know what it's about, it is about a reporter who goes back to her hometown to investigate the death of some young girls that are kind of suspicious. Now, our main character comes from a small southern town, and that makes for the perfect setting. You can literally like hear the flies buzzing when you're reading the book and like smelling all the beautiful flowers, but also just smelling the heat. Everyone's got that they've got that southern hospitality, but it always comes with like a little something extra, right? Like it's never just people being nice for the sake of it. There's always a little something hidden behind their smiles and their polite words. And I feel like that just makes such a perfect thriller setting. And so this book, when I read it, I got all of the southern small town vibes. I got all of the creepy neighbors that know more than they let on. I got all of that kind of people that are hiding things, but they're doing it so politely that you can't really call them out. Like, it was just such a perfect read for this time of year. The other thriller I would like to recommend is another fairly popular one, but again, this one to me just screamed summer, and it's When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. This one is set in New York, and it is about a woman who notices that things are starting to change in the neighborhood where she grew up, but they're not changing in the kind of normal way where communities kind of just grow and shift as their demographic shifts. She thinks there might be something a little bit more sinister going on as people who have been there for decades and decades suddenly pack up and leave. Suddenly new businesses are popping up without any sign of the previous owners of the building. Things are a little funky. And while that sounds kind of not that thrillery or interesting at first glance, this was a really, really good one to just kind of think about how you could relate this to the real world, because one of the main kind of themes of this book is gentrification of neighborhoods belonging to people of color. And that kind of made for a really interesting read because you're questioning your own sanity the entire time, as is the main character. And it just kind of made for a really, I don't want to say like this was incredibly thought-provoking because this is something that people go through all the time, but it made for just a kind of interesting read. It almost read like satire a little bit, which made it a bit more elevated than just a typical thriller. The reason to me that this feels like a summer thriller is because, if I'm not mistaken, it takes place in the summer in New York City, and it's in a neighborhood that has all these beautiful brownstone houses. And to me, that vibe is just like that's a core memory for me. When I visit New York, most of the time it's during the summer, and that's like what I associate with it is like the brownstones and like people sitting on their stoops and like walking around with drinks and kids playing outside. And so to me, that like beautiful idyllic setting of that brownstone neighborhood, this community that has so much history and love behind it, being slowly infiltrated by you don't know what, I think it's just such a perfect setting. One of the central points around which this novel is structured is like a community garden, people being neighborly, and again, that just evokes really like summery feelings, but with this like darker undertone simmering underneath. So I think if you're looking for like a really good read to take with you on vacation somewhere, this would be it. The next one is what I'm going to consider a bit of a crossover. So this is definitely more of a horror book, but it's just so fun, campy, and stupid that I think it would work even if you think you might not be a horror reader. And again, this is a very popular one, but it's one that I definitely would recommend to read during the summer because of those campy, pulpy vibes, and that is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now, this is about two girls who are in high school. They are best friends, and there is a birthday party at some point. One of them goes into the woods, and when she comes back, she's a little bit different. And the whole point is that, like, this book is just a big nostalgia bomb for the 80s. Everything from the music to the outfits to the sayings to the settings, everything about this screams like a nice 80s summer. And while obviously this kind of takes place a bit during the school year because the girls are seeing each other in the school year, it takes place in like a warmer setting. I'm pretty sure at some point they're by the ocean. I'm fairly certain it's like Florida or something. So there's that element, but also just because of how pure dumb fun this book is, I think it's such a perfect summer read. I read it in like 2 days over vacation a couple years ago, and it just hit the spot. I was like sitting by the campfire reading this, and it just felt so right, even though it's a horror book. I also just think nostalgia for being a teenager and nostalgia for certain eras, just a very summery feeling, right? It's not like you're being bombarded with like sadness over those days being gone. It's just like a fun little romp down history lane, and I think that's just a very, very good option for anyone who maybe not be into horror that much but kind of wants to get into it in general. This book is good for that, but it's also just a really good pick if like you still want to read some horror, but it's kind of, you don't really want to read like a slasher or anything that's too Halloween-y. So this one's a good pick. Is it an amazing book? No, I had some issues with it, but if you're looking for like, yeah, dumb fun, this is the book. In a similar vein of just kind of pure dumb fun, I have The Ruins by Scott Smith. So this one's a bit on the nose, I will say. A group of friends are vacationing in Mexico, and they meet a tourist from a different country that's like, hey, my brother disappeared. I'm trying to look for him. Do you guys want to go on a little excursion outside of the resort and see if we can find him? They agree, and then shit hits the fan. I won't specify what exactly it is, but like you are deep in like the Mexican jungle wilderness, but also you are at certain points like out in like a deserty area that's quite exposed. So you're dealing with the heat, the sun, vegetation, just all the things that scream summer, which is why I said this is kind of on the nose, like it is set literally in Mexico, but it's still got those really just fun, pulpy vibes. Like this is not an intellectual book at all. This is not even that deep of a book or that interesting of a book, but if you just want some kind of dumb fun, just a good, stupid horror that gets you reading when you're not really in the mood to read, or you just kind of want something that's horror adjacent, but like you don't really want to read, again, a thick, like gruesome thriller or whatever, like this is the vibe. It's not good, but it's definitely fun, very summery. You get all those like hot Mexican desert and jungle vibes. You feel hot, you feel sticky like the characters do. It hit that totally on the spot. The next one is the only one I still have physically, surprisingly. But again, slightly on the nose, but not too much. It is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. This is the first book in a series, but I found it kind of ended just perfectly fine on its own. You can totally read this as a standalone. So this is about a high school girl who is just obsessed with horror and slashers, and she's a bit odd. She doesn't really fit in, but she's like, you know what, I found my niche and I'm sticking to it. And then she slowly starts realizing that there might be a slasher starting to take place in her small mountain town. Now, this mountain town is quite close to a summer camp where a massacre did take place prior to the events of this novel. So you can kind of see where it's like slightly on the nose, but it completely works, right? Because you've got all the good slasher tropes and the kind of satirization of these tropes. Like, I love when horror takes horror tropes and kind of pokes fun at them and just kind of twists them on their head, and that's exactly what this book does, because it's got this mountain town setting and there's like a lake and boats and like a summer party. It's got that very Friday the 13th vibe, a little bit of I Know What You Did Last Summer, like all those classic teen slashers, but just kind of the fun parts with like a good setting, a good protagonist. A lot of people don't like the protagonist, but I think she's just a really good person to take you along on this journey. So if at any point this summer you find yourself in the mood for one of the classic teen slashers, but it's not quite spooky season yet, this is definitely what you should pick up. It does everything beautifully, but just twists some of the tropes a little bit on its head. It's fun, it's camp, pun intended, it's good stuff, and I think this is definitely one of those that's better suited to be read in the summer. And the final book on this list is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. So also the first one in a series. This one was recently made into a movie as well, and some people really prefer the movie. I think the book was just spectacular. I don't even want to touch the movie. This is technically a cosmic horror. It is about a mysterious area in our world known as Area X, and over the years about a dozen teams of researchers have tried to go and explore, and all of them have had very different results. Some of them catastrophic, some of them overwhelmingly positive. So the consensus is, even though there's no consensus between the teams, something funky is going on at Area X, and you're following the latest expedition composed entirely of women. You don't know their names. You don't really know much about them, you just know kind of what their job description is, and you are following them traversing Area X. And this is cosmic horror at its finest. This is one of my favorite horror books of all time. It's one of the best horror books I've ever read, best sci-fi books I've ever read. It's one of those that's just stuck with me because of just how terrifying it is, and I love it for that. It's just batshit. The reason I'm suggesting it specifically for summer is twofold. The first one's simple, it's super short, and yes, it is part of a trilogy, but all the 3 books are basically novellas. They're quite short, and that's all you need because they are packed with all sorts of weird creepy crawly shit and all sorts of crazy stuff. You don't need much more than that, so they're nice and short. The other reason is because Area X is kind of tropical almost. There's a lot of lush vegetation and life and animal life and plant life. It is also beside some kind of body of water, so there's a lighthouse that the characters get to explore, and all in all it just feels like you're taking a vacation in a different world, and you're, you know, it's not a particularly relaxing vacation because, you know, people are experiencing distress, but it's definitely a vacation in another world, and to me that's kind of summer. You're on vacation, but this one's got a little element of cosmic horror, almost a different planet, but it's technically set on our world, which kind of feels a little bit unsettling. To me, this is just one of those, if you're looking for something short and sweet and utterly terrifying to pick up during the summer, this is the one I would recommend. So that was it. Nice, short and sweet. I just kind of had this bouncing around in my head for a while. I had like a written list of these books because I was like, I really liked all of these books specifically for the summer and like as summer horror and thriller books. There's something very, very satisfying about reading horror in the summer because it feels like you're supposed to be reading happy things and you're not. What does that say about me? Who knows? Let me know if you have other summer thriller or horror recommendations. I'm always on the lookout for some that give me those vibes. Spooky season isn't my thing as much. I love fall, I love winter, but it's more for other things, not so much like reading horror and watching horror movies and all that kind of stuff. So if you have any summer horror recommendations, please let me know. Other than that, my social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!